Well, welcome again this morning, and we're going to continue on the talk on health restoration and energy recovery. This is part 2, and particularly this time it's going to be more specific about metabolic diseases and what can be done. So before I start, I think I'll have a word to our Father and we'll just pray for Father's blessing that this will flow and make some sense to you. Father, we thank you, can commune with you and be here and just enjoy the fellowship and the wonderful times together, and the messages that we're hearing are coming from you, and the little chats on the side as we go for walks and things, and seeing how you're blessing. And we want to give you praise and gratitude, Father, for life and health energy, the agape, and your great healing power, and with the practical things we can do as well, because the gospel is very practical. It's not just theory, it's about aligning with your life principles, and we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So a little review of part 1. We considered God's original design, nature's candy. What's that? About fruit, depending on fruit. History of sugar, which is a counterfeit of fruit, fresh fruit. Why excess sugar is harmful. How in the 60s, remember the whole sugar industry shifted the blame away from fat to sugar. From sugar to fat, I should say. And how fats actually are good for us, and what the Bible indicates, how the Bible indicates God designed us to eat certain kinds of fats and not other fats. Okay. Now, part 2, this is a little bit of an outline. have a lot of slides to go through, so I'm going to be probably try and talk fairly rapidly through some of it, but give some pauses, just because of the amount of information I want to share with you, because I think this will be value, and you can always go back, and if you have a key, USB, you can go over this again or watch the video again, live stream, and access that guide with some of this information. So in this putting this talk together, it was hard to know what to leave out and what to add in. So I did a lot of pruning down and then adding and pruning back. And so I'm trying to compress a fair bit of information to give context and to give some tools and things out for people out there that want to feel the need to explore this further, especially if you're challenged with a metabolic disease. Then I think this information will be particularly valuable for you to go and do your own research and explore. That's if you've been like me and tried everything under the sun, every kind of remedy and natural therapy protocol and so forth, and supplements and dietary interventions and all that, because I've tried everything. And so what I'm going to share is the things that work for me. It might not necessarily work for that person or this person or that and the other person. So it's very individual. I find health, people are biochemically individual and different, and so it's working within your physical constitution and finding out what works for you with the Lord's guidance. He wants us to come and reason together, and to be intelligent about these things and to learn and to move forward. So for several years, this is what I suffered, and this is just a broad kind of summary. CFS, you know what that is? No. Chronic fatigue syndrome. Metal toxicity, because I had mercury fillings and I had exposure through work, through different metals, cadmium, lead and so forth. And chronic inflammation and low blood sugar, metabolic problems and major gut problems, which I mentioned yesterday. So I did multiple self-experiments, and in order to improve my health and try and recover, so in my late teens, 20s, I became seriously ill, blood sugar problems, CFS, and at that time, it took me a long time to realise and accept the fact that even unrefined, complex carbohydrates like grains and fruit, generally excellent foods for people, for the average person, or in good health, but for me, they were not helping me. And so it took me many, many years to come to that conclusion that I had to do some, what I call dietary manipulations in order to heal. So with the goal of getting back to the ideal, which is fruits, grains, nuts and vegetables, yeah? Ideal diet, original diet. So that might seem strange to people if you've never heard of that concept of excluding grains and fruits from your diet, but this is what I had to do in order to recover. And it's not that they're bad foods, they're not at all, but for a person that has a problem with insulin and digestion, they can perpetuate problems. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. And so at the time, I attempted to improve my health with numerous protocols. The problem was many and most of these interventions involved high carb methodology, high carb carbohydrates. For example, low fat raw juicing, which helps some people recover. And I'm going to show you examples of some of those people. They're unmitigated disaster for ectomorphic body type that has a high energy profile and has a problem with insulin. It's just not going to work for those people. And so, again, these things are fantastic for some people, but that's if they're providing to have well-balanced, proper functioning energy systems. So I went to many, many different physicians, alternative and traditional, with no progress. Then I tried countless supplements, supplemental products, alternative therapies with still very little progress. And eventually I began many specific self-experiments to find out what was going on personally. So I became interested in the stories of people that recovered, like recovery stories, and there's plenty of that on the internet. And even some of them were doctors and health professionals that they got sick and how they got well. And I like their stories particularly because they even have more compassion. Physicians seem to be compassionate people and want to help people, but once they've been down there and they recover, it's like they have a different dimension to them, which is really good. And so the beginning of disease reversal requires hope, determination, and a lot of patience. If anybody's been there, you just got to have that determination. And so the research I'm going to share is recovery stories and so forth. And it's up to you to decide what path you want to go. And if you're already healthy and you're happy with your lifestyle, then you probably don't need to change that direction you're going on. But others, you might want to make little tweaks. So, gratitude. I'm very, very thankful for the unique and inspiring individuals presented later in this, and I want to put a disclaimer or really emphasise this point that although I don't agree with necessarily the worldview, Paleolithic, evolutionary, whatever, or all the methodologies that they're using, the ones that I am going to feature are those that I think they're saying some things, principles that are really, really important that fit with, remember the threefold integrative model yesterday was the Bible, experience, life experience, and science. So I'm trying to harmonise with all that. That's the foundation. For example, there's an Austrian physician I mentioned yesterday, and his name is Dr. Wolfgang Lutz, and he's done extensive clinical observations. He's an inventor and a researcher, and he had his own dramatic health improvement by just manipulating his diet. And I think there's a lot to learn from him, particularly, specifically in regards to sugar. Now, he's a non-Adventist, just everyday physician, Austrian physician, and his story is interesting because he knows that the people in Austria, even the farmers that were working from sun up to sundown and exercising all day, they were still getting sick. Cancer and problems and heart disease and all that, diabetes. And so he wanted to know why, as a young graduate medical doctor out from Vienna, and part of his life work was to gather data and so forth. So it's interesting, for 40 years, over 40 years, and so that's interesting. There's another story I came across recently, and I found it fascinating. It's a famous experiment that involved 36 healthy, conscientious objectors, and it's called the Great Minnesota Semi-Starvation Experiment. Has anybody heard of that?
No.
Yeah. Well, it was at the time, just in 1944, 1945, after the Second World War, where they were wondering what to do with war-torn countries in Europe and how to rehabilitate people that have been through famine or been starved out of concentration camps and so forth. And it's a very interesting story. Who would like to hear that story of what happened within that year? Because it was done by Dr. Ansel Keys, this guy. He was interested in nutrition. And anyway, he did it in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Anyway, yeah, there you go. That's familiar, isn't it? But so I'll be sharing that. Now, a little bit, just a tidbit on Dr. Weston Price that I mentioned last year. And has anybody heard of Dr. Weston Price? Yeah. Here's not many. He's a famous dentist, and he was an explorer and like an anthropologist. He would look at, skulls and things like that, gather information. So he travelled to 6 continents. And Dr. Weston Price is an interesting man. Him and his wife, they travelled 6 continents. And not for the purpose of looking at people with bad health, but he was looking at people with radiant health, optimal health, men, women and children. And he wanted to know what was their lifestyle habits and what were they eating and so forth, because he was tired of filling teeth in America and drilling and filling teeth. So he wanted to, what was the reason for escalating dental care, is dental decay. And so he wrote a book, which I have and I've read it. It's a thick book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And it's a particularly interesting book, but there's a lot in it, but and I didn't agree with everything, and that's fine, but the common denominator, or the big takeaway from that book for me was that he was, the hypothesis was that white flour and white sugar, refined table sugar, was the 2 important things that were impacting children's health and creating not only dental decay but deformities in the jaw and in the whole physical constitution, because these were trade commodities back then. In a few decades back, they were trading a lot of sugar and white flour and so forth. And these people that used to have natural, unprocessed foods, they were getting problems with their health. And there's an example of people that have just wide arches and excellent dental health. And he took lots of photos of people, their teeth, their structure. And someone asked me, you're going to be talking on this aspect that I touched on yesterday, and I didn't want to go deep into this, but I'll give it a little bit of time because I think it's important. Not only mouth breathing can create crooked teeth, and there's a reason, because in a child, because God has designed the tongue to push against the roof of the mouth, and that exerts gentle pressure up to about 0.5 kilogram to develop the maxilla, the upper jaw, so that a child has nice, wide, spaced teeth. And when they breathe through the mouth, the tongue drops and that pressure is not going against the top of the roof of the mouth. Does that make sense? And then there's crowding of teeth, and then father has to go down the road to see Dr. Robinson, whoever, some dentist, and fork out $6,000 to have the teeth whitened with braces. And there's a growing movement within dentistry, and I have a good friend who's a dentist, and he's fully aware of this, that there's a paradigm shift, and it's not a big group, but there are a concerned group that say orthodontics don't solve the problem. They straighten teeth, but they don't improve function. So there's alternatives to orthodontics, and that's special splint that expands, it releases the muscles rather than just straightens the teeth, and it helps with the neck, the cranial cervical junction there, where your neurology, where the nervous system starts, takes pressure off the vagus nerve and these neck flexor muscles, and not a lot, but a significant amount of clients that I see that have retracted jaws like this, they've got cranial tension, and they've got nervous system problems as well with sympathetic dominance, where the nervous system's just switched on and then in this fight and flight mode. The body can't relax and they've got all this tension. It's interesting how one thing affects the other. The jaw is so important in relation to the whole anatomy. And so, my friend in Canberra, he's trained someone up in the Sunshine Coast with this alternative to orthodontics, to braces. I'm so thankful I've met this guy. He's a young dentist, Dr. Tom, and he's very holistic dentist, and he's helping people. So anybody interested in that, they can come and talk to me. Does that make sense? I don't want to go more than that because I really need to move on, but that gives you an idea. So we talked about this. It's a no-brainer. Excessive amounts of sugar, they're going to create problems. Now there's people, photos from Dr. Weston Price, he took of people that were just living on junk, living on too much sugar and too much white flour. They went away from the natural diet, and you see the problems created. He has a lot more photos in the book and a lot more information. So, excuse me. So here's some successful recovery stories, and some of them are going to be high carb advocates and some of them are going to be low carb advocates. So I'm going to show both sides. And there's just a sort of a picture of a few people, and one person in there is one of my clients that I'm going to talk about. And I've asked permission. I said, hey, can I share your story? Leslie said, yeah, fine. And the other day he texted me and said, how did you talk? I said, I'm not there yet. So this was an interesting book I came across a few years by this European lady, Romanian, lovely lady from Victoria, my home place, and it's by Dr. Kirschner. And they're very poor pictures. I could not find the book in my stack of books in storage, so I just went on the internet, fortunately got a PDF, and I just copied and pasted it. And this was a lady that was in a car accident, I think, anyway, that she developed gallbladder disease and splenic leukemia and arthritic joints. She was in a real mess. And so they didn't know what to do. She was in hospital, and you know what they started giving her? A spoonful of carrot juice. That's all she could get down at the time, just a little bit. And you could just see the progression. And a few months later, she started to be able to consume more of this until she was drinking, I don't know, about 4 or 5 litres a day, which is the usual amount when you're doing that juice kind of thing, protocol. Carrot juice, and then she ended up acquiring dynamic health, working like 12-hour days on her feet constantly, tireless, has abundant energy, and they call her Mrs. X in the book. And all she does at the end of the day, she has a large vegetable salad with avocado and nuts and seeds, and she has some fruit, a bit of fruit, but that's it. She still drinks the carrot juice. So, yeah, it's an interesting turnaround. So she's normally 135 pounds, and back there she went down to 65 pounds. Yeah, so I don't know how many of that in kilos, but it's not very. So when I saw that a few years ago, I thought, oh wow, great, I'm going to do that. So I was drinking all this juice, and I'm still lean, but back then I was worse. I was really, really skinny, and I was getting worse. It was pretty disconcerting, pretty humiliating. I was drinking a lot of the stuff, so, you know, spreading it out, and then I looked at Gerson therapy, and that infused new life and hope. Then I saw the story of George Malcolmus. Anybody heard of that? Yeah. That man is a Baptist minister that had colon cancer, and he cured himself of colon cancer. It's a very interesting story, so I'll get to him after her. So anyway, this is her. That's another picture. It's not a very good picture, so I do apologise for that. But yeah, here's a little boy, toddler. And he was born with leukemia, and the poor little guy, I think he was allergic to breast milk or whatever. He couldn't get it down, or he might have been missing a bile duct. And anyway, they just gave him carrot juice, and so I think 2 years later, he's kind of like, there it is, his little sister, and holding this big heavy jug of the stuff, and I hope he didn't drop it on the floor. Crash, you know. And so he's done, he did well, he recovered. David Klein, anybody heard of David? I know you. Yeah, Gavin has. He's a fruitarian. Anybody heard of fruitarians? Yeah. Kind of imagining they're living in the Garden of Eden, just live on fruit. And bless him, you know, I mean, that's the idea. Well, he actually claims that he's been successful in reversing Crohn's disease. So by fruitarian, by the way, it doesn't just mean fruit. They're having seeds and avocados and green foods, tender greens and things like that. So, you know, a few blended drinks or juices and all that. And a little bit of steamed veg here and there, but largely fruit. And these guys, they eat tons of fruit, and they have to get their calorie intake. And anyway, so there he is there. And so David Klein, free of Crohn's disease, getting plenty of sunshine and rest, and adopting a raw fruit-based diet. The fruitarian diet consists of, well, I already mentioned that, you know, the fruit and greens and things like that. So he's a PhD, and he wrote an interesting book, and I read that, you know, a few years back, and I thought, oh, that'll be the answer, but it didn't really help me very much. Now here's George Malcolmus, that Baptist. He's a bit older there. He put out a video a few years back, and on why Christians get sick. And then he printed a book on why Christians get sick, and he said no one wanted to buy my book because it's such a negative title. But it's interesting because after he cured himself of colon cancer, and he was a minister of the Baptist church, he opened up a little sort of cafe restaurant, and they were serving up the carrot juice, you know, his favourite. Then they had vegetable salads and things like that. And he said that people would just started packing in because he'd share his story. And then he said, although his book wasn't selling, that little sort of place, restaurant, was getting too small, so they had to expand. And then he developed a healing centre called Hallelujah Acres. And anyway, so his story, back to his problem. So he was on a SAD diet, which was an acronym for Standard American Diet. The SAD diet, or the Standard Australian Diet. So he went from a junkie diet overnight to all raw, well, basically with a litre or two of carrot juice a day. So he just jumped straight in. And it was through the persuasion and the suggestion of one of his pastoral friends, a colleague called Lester Roloff. Lester Roloff, someone like that. Anyway, and he was a big inspiration to George. And that propelled him. This Lester said to George, don't go the medical route, go God's way. And so that's what he did. And so it's an interesting story, George Malcolm's. And so he, and this is important to explain this too, in recovery it's not usually linear, it's not always a one big leap, smooth leap, it's up and down like that. And you might be doing something right, and you're going down, and then you think, oh no, this is not working, and quit. And that can be a problem, so it's about consistency. So, he said it was like an up and down roller coaster for him. Here's another guy, and his name is John Rose, and he likes the sun. Sorry, I couldn't get a picture of the shirt with the guy with the shirt on, so you'll just have to make do. But he's 64 years old, and the guy looks amazing, honestly. And he drinks so much vegetable juice, and that's his gospel about, healing the body and getting back to nature. And it's interesting, but I'm just showing this as an example. These are some of the people that they don't know the message that we have, but they're very disciplined in what they do and very dedicated. Yeah.
When they talk about making vegetable juices and drinks, do you drink the whole pulp and fibre and everything, or do you strain it through a strainer?
Yeah, excellent question. Yeah. He's asking, well, do you have the pulp or do you just have the juice, the liquid? We can do either. I think if someone's in a desperate situation, they've just got to give their digestive system a break. They can't handle all that fibre, some people, so they like the juice. There was a lady called Victoria Butanko, and she started the green smoothie revolution, where this Russian family, they just started, their thing was blended fruits and blended vegetables and having the whole fibre and the pulp. And I've tried that. I didn't really like it as much as the juice. It was all right, but...
So if you keep the pulp, that gives you a lot of fibre.
Yeah. And I don't think fibre's everything either. I used to, but I think as far as constipation and gut problems and all this, thing about fibre, it comes down to gut bacteria. It's a very, very big thing to do with a lot of things. So, yeah, I think it's a matter of finding what works for the individual. So, yeah, there's two ways of doing it. But anyway, he was just having the juice, that guy. So fasting, it's interesting in the Bible, it talks a lot about fasting. And they call that's juice fasting, but then there's water fasting. And his thing is, well, there's so many pollutants in the world now, and in people we're exposed to in the water and the food and everything around us in the air, that for some people it's a bit too dramatic for them to just go on a water fast, of drinking pure water like decades or hundreds of years ago. And so he's advocating juice, but then there's other people that still find water fasting works for them. And it's interesting that in the Bible, if you do a study, there's several verses about fasting. And yet when they were ill, I put on sackcloth and humbled myself with, fasting. So a connection between fasting and illness. So this lady I'm going to show next, Chantal Ray, she's an interesting lady because she's a Christian. And a friend sent me a video link and I watched it and I thought, oh yeah. And I thought I'd just share this with you. I know it's a bit Americanized, but look past that. She lost 30 pounds with intermittent fasting. Yeah. Yeah, and now she said she tried like 1,000 different, she said, I tried every diet known to man, quite to try and lose some weight. She said none of it worked. And then she said, I started reading the Bible and I noticed there was a lot of verses in there about fasting. So she did intermittent fasting here and there. And Chantal Ray, and she comes up with 10 principles on this video talk that I watched. She didn't tell us what those were. So I don't know what her 10 commandments are, those 10 principles, but it's obviously in her book. But it's from the Bible. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what it was. She found 10 health principles from the Bible. I'm sure one of them is sunlight and rest and air. So, and she healed a thyroid disorder. Yeah.
I've also heard, Jeff, that intermittent fasting means not eating between meals.
Yeah, it can be. And for some people it's a 2-meal plan, just eating 2 meals a day because they have a 16-hour window where they're not eating at all.
Yeah.
And actually Ellen White recommended 2 meals are very good for a lot of people. And it's interesting that a lot of people are catching on that today. They're not even Adventists, they wouldn't have a clue about the counsel of the Spirit of Prophecy, what she said, and they're just doing it. And they're experiencing health benefits. So,
Walter Fight told me that
yeah.
he only has 2 meals a day and he finds the optimal times are the morning and evening sacrifice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's exactly.
There we go. Yeah. Morning and evening. Yeah, according to Walter Fight. Thanks, Craig. No. Low carb success stories. Well, I want to share something. I was at one clinic and I had this guy coming in to see me a couple of times, and he was a big guy, and his name was Lester. He was the third Lester. And then I saw him a year later at a different clinic, more high-end clinic kind of thing, and anyway, he came to fill in the form, and when he filled in a client form, I noticed that, same name and worked at the same place. I won't mention where. But anyway, it was an unusual job, and I thought, he doesn't look like that man. And I've had 2 experiences like that. And anyway, when I saw him the first time, he'll be the guy on the left that I'll show up next. And when I actually saw him, which was not long back, I saw him as the guy in the middle. And so there you go. There's Lester on the left, and he teaches kids about reptiles and all that. So he's got that slithery thing around his neck, and so he went down from 110 kilos to 69. And I said, "How'd you do that?" And he said, "Oh, a lot of hard work." He's got this dude with a lot of hard work. So he's at the gym. And that third picture, I only popped that in the last minute because he sent it to me. I said, "Do you mind if I use your pictures?" Because he showed me that. And he said, "Oh no, and I'll send you another one, so I'm putting that up for your sake." He's a really nice fellow, and he developed bilateral hernia. He got a tear, and it's a complicated issue, and so I've been helping him, trying to sort of help him in his journey. And he's a Canadian fellow, lives in Australia. And so anyway, he lots of green veggies and things like that, and got rid of all processed sugar, all white sugar. Don't you think that's pretty good? Yeah, so he's happy. And now here's a kid from Wolfgang Lutz's book, and he was 113 kilograms. And 2 years later, that's the same boy on the right. This boy here, I'm showing this because he had a disease of affluence, a metabolic disorder, an insulin disorder, which carbohydrate was being stored and not burned as fuel. So there you go. And so that boy had 250-pound boy's condition was the result of nutrient surplus, too much carbohydrate. Over 2.5 years, he ate much less of one macronutrient, and he ate actually more of another. Can you guess? He reduced his carbohydrates, and the result, he lost a ton of excess fat and acquired a normal figure. So, yeah. Now, I'm going to show another one.
Did you tell us what he ate the most of? More of another?
Yeah, he ate fats.
Yes.
Yeah. Animal fats, cream, butter, things like that.
And vegetable fats as well?
I don't know. Vegetables. But anyway, this is really important. The principle here is about metabolism, not so much what he ate. It's about sugar, refined sugar, the damage that it does. So please don't misunderstand. misinterpret what I'm sharing.
So
I'm
are
just
you
sharing.
Are you just saying that the sugar affects your
Metabolism, yeah. Now I'm going to show how it can go the other way. According to Wolfgang Lutz, he says people can either get very weak or very big, and he calls it catabolism. It's like catabolic, where things are breaking down, and some people get anabolic with catabolic. So it's when it's all to do with the hormones. So here's another example. Okay, here's a 28-year-old male switched from a moderate carb, low fat vegetarian diet. So he was a runner, he was eating salads, fruits, grains, very low fat. And he switched from to a low carb, high fat diet to recover. So I think that's interesting, because I went to a dentist years ago and he pulled out a book called this book, Life Without Bread, and he showed me that picture when I was really, really unwell, and that really got my attention. And I thought, when I go home, I'm going to get that book. And I read it, and even back then I thought, no, I don't agree with this and that, but that wasn't the point. There were principles in that book that I think a lot of nutritionists miss, and a lot of health advocates, they overlook this whole thing with the energy utilisation. So he's got a very high energy profile, and it goes into detail in the book. You know, these body types that are ectomorphic have high energy profile, and they're hungry all the time because they're not utilising energy properly. So it's interesting. The common denominator, that the young man ate less carbohydrate and became stronger and gained knee weight. So the common denominator, you could say both the young man and the 28-year-old man fasted. This is a bit of a riddle, you've got to think about this. Fasted and achieved different desired results. They went on a carbohydrate fast, limited to 72 grams a day, but they both increased their fat intake, and obviously they became relatively healthier. Yeah. So now, insulin bankruptcy. Sugar, at least excessive sugar, is harmful. Refined table sugar is the absolute worst carbohydrate. Low carbohydrates equal demand for insulin. Low demand for insulin. High carbs causes a demand for insulin, an amount the body doesn't have. Thus, the sugar accumulates in the blood, causing high blood sugar. It is excreted, then the blood sugar becomes low. God designed glucose to get into the muscle cells for energy, not to linger about in the bloodstream. So a wonderful human living machine is only designed to handle so much glucose from carbohydrate at once, and it has a way of defending itself against excessive glucose in the bloodstream. It defends itself, and I mentioned this yesterday, against excessive insulin production by counteracting the pancreas's activities. It creates a weapon known as antibodies that destroy beta cells, the cells that excrete insulin. As a result, insulin production decreases. Then there is insulin bankruptcy, causing, guess what? Type 1 diabetes. So, cause of carbohydrate metabolism dysfunction. And this is, I'm quoting Dr. Wolfgang Lutz, that treated thousands of people. He says, what is responsible for so many of the disturbances seen in high carbohydrate eaters? The answer begins with the hormone insulin. Insulin is perhaps the single most important hormone in the body because it is the one that responds directly to carbohydrates in our diet. Our body's primary response to carbohydrates is to release insulin into the bloodstream. Okay. Now, Jordan Rubin's story. Here's an interesting man. This young man is a Jewish man that had wealthy parents, and he got really, really sick with Crohn's disease. And they sent him all over the world to try and get him recovered. Went to the best health clinics, and he estimated he spent between $150,000 and $200,000 on different natural health protocols to try and get well. He was desperate. So I can kind of identify a bit with his story. So he tried everything under the sun, or what Chantal Ray would say was every diet known to man, to try and sort his problem. And I like his story. I put it in because he's actually became a Christian and he turned to God for healing. And that was part of his recovery, to actually get down to the beach in California or Florida, live in his motorhome that his dad bought for him. He's just out of uni and he just used to soak up the sun, and he'd go to the local health food store and buy the juice, the raw juice, and he got into this culture food, fermented goat's milk and all this stuff, raw stuff, and fermented foods, and everything was grass-fed and organic and all that. But so it wasn't until he was 19 years old that his health started deteriorating, and at alarming weight loss of 80 pounds. He experienced excruciating digestive problems, pain, nausea, and ultimately diagnosed, as I said, with Crohn's disease. And so, he was determined and got well. So here's a couple of Bible promises. He gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So there's Jordan kind of today, and I'll show you 3 pictures that I think you'll find interesting. So that's how bad he was there. He was close to death, really, really bad. And so he went on a fairly low-carb, high-fat, natural diet, including raw vegetable salads, little fruit, raw cultured goat milk, raw eggs. And this is what he did. I'm not necessarily agree with everything in this. This is what he did. Grass-fed meats and low-carb, live food, juice, rest, sunshine, and faith in God, and would heal him. So next I'll share a little bit about my situation. So my personal recovery story, over 20 years, and I've pretty well covered that in the intro. So now I don't have chronic fatigue and depression and things like I used to, so it's taken a long time. And I'm still in rehabilitation, I honestly am. There's still work to go, but health is a journey, not a destination. But I praise Father that I've sustained some pretty good healing so far in my body, and energy has come back, which is good. And so I've done a lot of detoxing, I've done a lot of juicing, and I'll show you some of the things that I've done. So my mantra is, over 20 years I've tried every known gut healing diet known to man. And I'm just going to flick through these quickly. At first I thought a high carb mixed vegetarian diet would be the answer. Unfortunately it was not. The core difference, and what I was been emphasising, is difference between those who are successful in adopting a high carbohydrate diet, natural diet, and those who fail is largely to do with how one's body uses and responds to insulin. More often than not, pancreatic dysfunction, also known as insulin resistance, can be traced back to 1 or 2 things. And basically it's a past history, eating a lot of sugary foods as a kid. It sets up imbalances in the body. So I tried the elimination diet, or the low allergy diet. I tried rotation diet, anti-candida diet, raw vegan diet, live food juice, fruitarian diet. Tried that for a while. High protein diets. That was not the answer. Low FODMAPs. Anyone heard of FODMAPs?
Yeah.
It's strange. Yeah, I tried that. Specific carbohydrate diet, Elaine Gottschall. Some of these actually helped in a way, a little bit, but not significantly. And the low carb diet, and I tried this about 10 years ago, but looking back now, I wasn't following it enough to initiate the full benefits. And I mentioned that yesterday, when I tried raw milk for a while, and that did help. That was one of the things that really did help, but not in full recovery. And so fortunately, after a while, improvement and trialling even all those different things, the proper application, I'm finding that's what's working currently. And so for the sake of healing my gut and in order to begin balancing metabolism, I had to avoid and minimise even eating, the yummy stuff, the nice stuff, like these kind of things, like raw vegan desserts and things like that. You have little shops popping up now, and out there the new ages and different people have them, and they're nice. They're quite healthy desserts, alternative to sugar. But I find I don't do well with too much of that kind of thing. Not at this point anyway. Later on I probably will. So what are the results for me of low carb nutrition? Well, I have better digestion. I don't have bloating and anything like that, any gut irritation, minimal. Skin has improved a bit. Feel more alive, more energetic. And this is after 2.5 months. So feeling calmer, more balanced. And generally, here's the big one, better circulation. I find, I just took a photo, I'm getting pink colour. Anybody that's battled with anemia, sometimes in cold hands and feet, you'll welcome blood down in your hands and feet. So it's interesting how that happens. So, yeah. So the lame will leap like a deer, claim God's promises, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. How are we going for time? How are we going? Yeah.
There's no rush.
I've got
There's only some of that lunch that helped you.
halfway through. There we go. That's doing well.
Yes, good point.
How about we're going to have a little stretch. We're going to have you stand up, and we're going to do this. Just going to.
Can Craig do it?
And this is good for the calf muscles. And actually, if you want to know how acidic your blood is, and you can do this at home, don't have to tell how many you can do of it. You get against the wall like that, and you balance yourself, and it's 1 foot like that, and see how many you can do. I did it with this group of like army people, when they averaged, I think, about 43 on 1 foot. So, yeah.
Calf muscles sore for days.
And I did that, and I had burning calves the next day. I tell you, it was good. Yeah.
And how do you tell about your blood acidity by doing that?
Well, he says that in this book by a Polish doctor, I think he said that if it's too much less than 40, then obviously you've got acidity. And I think, anyway, the more alkaline you are, the
more you can do.
I think so, yeah. I might not have that completely right. A time to rebuild. To everything, there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to kill old habits and patterns that stand in our way.
Amen.
And a time to heal. I heal, I restore, I kill and I make alive. Yeah. No, we're not into killing. And a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up. Sometimes it takes time to build a weak, run-down, semi-starved body. The Great Minnesota Experiment provides a window into this. Now, this next story is fascinating, and I think you'll all be able to take away something from this. And particularly in the sense that, maybe I should say this here right now, that some particularly young female teenagers that go on crazy fad diets to try and become like pencil thin model or whatever, and it's not healthy. Now, short fast here and there is healthy, but not caloric deprivation for a long period of time. It causes real damage in the body. And this experiment will show this clearly, which is interesting. So the Minnesota starvation experiment, and in 1945 under Dr. Ansel Keys. So the purpose, as I said, was to find out how to rehabilitate people after the war that were subject to famine, and look at the psychological effects of starvation as well. And that's important. So there were they were looking at the psychological aspects of this experiment, the outcomes. So the study design, the basic study design of Keys, he put it out there, and they had, does anybody want to do this? And there were like 400 applicants, people that wanted to do this. And the ones he chose were the conscientious objectors, because they didn't want to go and take a weapon and go in the war anyway. So they said, we'll do something to serve our country. Let's undergo this very self-sacrificing experiment, because I don't think they knew what they were in for, I tell you. And anyway, so he did it 3 months of a control period where I think he gave them about, an average bloke was about, I think it was 3,000 calories, something like that. Anyway, for 3 months, and they had cooks there and they were serving up the food, and they were all healthy men, and they were rigorously screened and tested, so they were healthy mentally and physically. Okay, so they start off like that. Now that picture, I think that's obviously through the experiment. Okay, yeah. So to study the effect of famine on war-torn countries in Europe, and the starvation experiment developed out of Keys' interest in nutrition. Keys convinced the military that a study of starvation could yield information that would have been both humanitarian and practical benefits. So Keys envisioned a year-long study divided into 3 parts: the initial 3-month control period, during which the food intake of the participants would be standardised, followed by 6 months of semi-starvation, and then 3 months of rehabilitation. And we can learn a lot from the rehab. Out of the more than 400 who volunteered, there were 36 who were deemed, who qualified. And by the way, they had their daily work assignments, and they had to walk about 22 miles a week as well. So I'd allow them to escape and walk down the street, down the pavement, past milk bars and shops during this time when they're feeling it. They're thinking, I'm hungry, I'm getting hungry. So and at first I thought, this is fine, but then it got tougher and tougher. And to find the subjects willing to put themselves through such prolonged deprivation, Keys recruited volunteers from among, as I said, the ranks of conscientious objectors. And he screened them and all that. And for the next 12 weeks, the control period of the experiment, Keys standardised their diet, allowing them 3,200 calories per day, while simultaneously putting them through a battery of tests to gather data on variables such as their heart size, blood volume, hearing, vision, fitness, body fat, etc. Psychological changes. Okay, here's what happened. None of the men had been overweight to begin with, their average weight in the control period being only 152 pounds, 69 kgs. So as they shed pounds, they rapidly grew skeletally thin. Keys carefully analysed and recorded the other psychological changes. So behavioural changes. Alright. With love for humanity, the 36 men entered into the experiment, but at this time the men hated being hungry. Time to love, time to hate. I'll just put that in. It is here where all the men started exhibiting behaviour that, and here's the point, behaviour that is very common in people with eating disorders or chronic dieters. Here are the things that happened to the men when the calories were cut to this level. Their strength and energy decreased. They became apathetic about all topics of interest except for one topic: food. You know, they weren't even interested in girls, these young men. Some of them had girlfriends, and then they kept dating them, and apparently it was just a little competition between themselves, a little secret, who can go the longest. They just lost interest in everything. Except for one thing, food. We've got to have food. Come on, cooks, chefs, give us more food. Because they reduced the food to 1,500 calories, 1,570 calories a day. Now, some of these people that do diets out there to lose weight, if they go down, here's the point, down to 16, less than 1,600 calories a day, they're going to be doing big damage to their body that's going to be hard to rehabilitate them. And I've seen some YouTubes of some ladies that have been dieters, you know, like that, and they've come back, they've healed, and they've actually mentioned and they've talked about this experiment. That's how I found out about it. It's quite interesting. So, yeah, and the food was their primary focus, so they go through cookbooks and they were dreaming. And some of them would just eat as much chewing gum and drink as much coffee, which was permitted, just to get extra calories. So they'd eat like 20 packs of chewing gum a day. They were ravenous. And I think, when is this going to end? You know, and so they would become irritable if their food was not served on time. They became depressed and lost a considerable amount of weight. So their heart rate went down, and they felt dizzy, lethargic, constantly cold. All these symptoms are very similar to those experienced by people with eating disorders or restrict their calories to a dangerously low level. And it can actually happen on a fruitarian diet, these things. So, because unless you eat so much fruit. So diets less than 1,200 calories a day is not a sustainable way of life and will push you to a semi-starvation mode. And here's one of the Dan Miller. He was one of the 36 and during the starvation phase and during recovery on the right. So there's a time to fast and a time to nourish. Now, 4,000 calories a day for these guys to recover.
What's normal?
Normal?
Yeah.
Generally a bit more for men than women. It's probably about 3,000, between 2,000 and 3,000, thereabouts. Yeah. Keys simultaneously gave them a vitamin and protein supplement to see if these would aid in their recovery. So he split them into 3 groups, and I'll show a little bit in the next slide. And some, after the starvation period, he increased by 400 calories. Another group, another 12 of them, 800 calories, and another one like 1,200 calories, in addition to what they were eating, the 1,570 calories a day. And after a few weeks, it became apparent to Keys that the supplements were doing nothing to help the men. In fact, the men in the lowest calorie group weren't even recovering at all. So he was giving them vitamins and protein, and it was useless, this stuff. So I think we can learn a lesson from that too. And eventually he learned that the only thing that was rehabilitating these men was by giving them way more food than initially thought necessary. And the only thing that seemed to help was more food. So Keys boosted the food intake of each group by 800 calories and and person's needs. So he said he eventually concluded that in order to recover from starvation, a person needs around 4,000 calories a day to rebuild their strength. Keys published a full report in an experiment about the experiment in 1950. It was a massive 2-volume work titled The Biology of Human Starvation. To this day, it remains one of the most comprehensive scientific examination of the effects of famine. You know that Pharaoh's dream, a time for every purpose under heaven, and it's talking about the 7 years famine to come and store up the grain, and the 7 lean kine or cows ate swallowing up the other ones, and it was like there was no change. Well, it was like what was happening with these 36 guys. They were eating and eating and eating, but it's like they weren't changing until a year later. Are you finding this interesting?
Yes, absolutely.
So when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still thin as in the beginning. A time to rebuild, time to build, rehabilitation. So there's a little bit, gives you a breakdown on, if you can read that. So yeah, and then because that first caloric increase wasn't working, he even upped it again. So group 4 was eating, 3,970 calories a day. So the main point, and as I said, if followed for a long period of time, these extreme diets can be problematic, especially for ectomorphic, light frame, fine bone people.
Ectomorphic mean?
Certain body types, sort of, you have the ectomorphic, endomorphic, and the esomorph. Esomorph are like really big boned, and so, So, indications of metabolic disorder. Do you consume a lot of sugary food when growing up as a kid? Do you have sustained energy throughout the day, even if you miss a meal or two? Do you experience low sugar episodes where your energy dwindles if you miss a meal? Do you have 6 or more dental fillings? Does your hormonal system run smoothly in a calm, balanced way? Is your nervous system peaceful and calm? What's your mood and mental ability like? Do you have fatigue? Are you constantly hungry? Do you have inability to lose weight? Do you have sugar cravings? Do you experience fatigue after meals? Do you have migrating aches or pains? Here's signs of hormonal imbalance, and I'm jumping from that topic, Minnesota experiment, back to the original. Polycystic ovary syndrome for women, acne, fragile hair, infertility, estrogen dominance, low thyroid, increased fat storage, particularly around the belly, high blood cholesterol and triglycerides. So, what are the solutions to diseases of metabolism? And by the way, I want to get back to the Minnesota experiment because I don't know, maybe I've lost a slide or two, but they actually all regained their normal health and strength. It was very slow, and Ansel Keys came out in the media and they were saying, what did you learn from the experiment? What can you tell us? And he said, well, actually, there'll be no appreciable amount of recovery without less than 4,000 calories. And some of them were eating like 12,000 calories a day. So the point is it took an enormous amount of energy to rebuild their bodies.
So when you're talking about calories, like, it was good food, or was it just really... Excellent question. Yeah, these guys, I really need to make this clear. Yeah. And I haven't made this clear. They didn't have a metabolic problem. They didn't have a pancreas problem or hormonal problem, so they started off healthy. They just needed calories, so they just got into pizza and potatoes and rice and starchy food, and that's what they did to recover. Yeah, and they were just eating a lot.
It's almost like they had to eat all the food they missed out on.
Yeah.
A bit like sleep, eh?
And it was 3 months. 3 months where they were where their calories were restricted to 1,570 calories a day.
And how many months recovery?
Yeah, about 9 months to a year. And they were hungry all the time, even a couple of them like 2 years later. I saw actually an interview or talk, it was a short one, by one of the men from that experiment. He's years later and he's actually talking about it. And it's very, very interesting.
It's interesting that happened in 1945.
Yeah.
And, I don't suppose they knew of the Holocaust victims at that time, because all of them had been starved almost to death, and when they opened up the death camps, it may have been able to help.
Well, they were. How can I say? They didn't know the war was going to be over before it did. And when the war was over, the press, the media, they came to poor old Ansel Keys, the guy that conducted the experiment. He said, "What have you learned from it? What have you learned from it?" And it was still in progression, the experiment. It was still, I mean, he was in a rehab, they were in a rehab phase. And he said, well, all I know so far is this, but then after, when it did finish, he had the data that he could able share, and they put in that book. So, yeah, it was, some of them were like eating 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 calories to recover. They were just genuinely hungry. They were really, really hungry.
So Jeff, because normally if you overeat, you're putting a burden on the stomach and
Yes.
you actually can't actually benefit from
Yes.
it. So how does that work?
Right, sure. Well, when he just increased the calories a little bit, they were going nowhere.
Mm.
Yeah. So I think this is very relative to the situations about the application context. So the context was semi-starvation and what the amount of energy it takes to recover. With an average person, yeah, overeating, you don't want to eat more than satisfying your hunger. So God's given us that, it's built into us, how much. So Wolfgang Lutz's radio, I want to finish with this. So he treated over 10,000 patients, and so he was curing diabetes, heart disease, gastrointestinal disorders and obesity, and boosting their strength and endurance. And so, and again, a disclaimer, I don't agree with all the methodology, but there's some very interesting things, the science-based principles that Lutz's convictions, the root cause and cure diseases of affluence, which was sugar, creating problems. And he says there's contented patients, patients whose symptoms abate, and the many who go on to achieve lasting health are reward enough for a physician. So being a research scientist, Wolfgang from Salzburg, he turned his inventive brain to everyday medicine, and he explored what he saw as a carbohydrate effect. And from the late 1950s, pioneered the use of low-carb nutrition in the treatment of a wide range of ailments with astonishing results. So he says, my awareness of these ailments was also closer home as I'd witnessed much serious disease in my own family. There were many instances of cancer, heart problems. Moreover, by now my own health was in considerable trouble. So the puzzle had also become a personal one. And this is the state of Wolfgang's own health at age 45. He had frequent colds and coughs, had mouth sores, herpes simplex, fever, sensitive skin, easily chaffed, calluses on the feet, rapidly receding hairline, anxious, edgy temperament, osteoarthritic hips. He used to like going skiing, and he couldn't ski, he couldn't do the sports, and he was just stuck in his medical practice. And so treating, you know that obese boy, I showed the picture of him before, he's treating a lot of obese kids in Austria and helping them to achieve a normal figure, and getting them to eat more fat, not less, but cutting down on carbohydrates. So he thought, well, I've got these problems, these issues, I'll put myself to the test. So he did a 4-year self-experiment. And so here's the results. Do you want to see what the results were, the outcome? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Initial tiredness, detoxing, any organ tissue repair, I don't know. But waking up brighter the next morning. Greater stamina with smoother, quicker work output. Change in mental state, better mood, humour, able to laugh more, calmer and more joyful, better able to handle stressful situations. Improvement of skin, stronger, less dry, less liable to fungal attacks, healthier scalp, reduced hair loss, free of migraines. He had these splitting headaches, they disappeared. And here's a big one, improved dental health. So he went to the dentist, and the dentist was saying he got really strong gums, and he stopped getting dental decay. So, and having that feeling, it's better quality sleep, less arthritic hip pain. That's within 6 to 9 months. So, although Lutz was not seriously ill like many of his patients, he still felt he needed to reduce his carb intake and improve his health. Then after some time, when his body was stronger and his metabolism balanced, he was able to increase his carbohydrate intake to a moderate amount. So he went from high carbs to 4 years low carbs, then to moderate carbs, maintaining this for the rest of life. And he lived to 98. And actually he said his hips, the calcium in his hips improved. He actually went back to skiing and doing stuff. And he said, I fell down a flight of stairs, and he said, normally you'd crack a hip at that age, no problem. He was robust. Now, here's something you'll find interesting, I'm sure. He was what he considered on the light side, about 65 kilograms. And after the 4 years, he went from 65, without going to the gym, to 79 kilograms. And it wasn't fat from the fat burning, it was connective tissue, bone density, and muscle mass increase. I thought that was really, really interesting. So he couldn't even get his ring on his finger because the bones had... He'd so basically gone from catabolic, with all that Austrian food, the rich cakes and sugary stuff, to anabolic, to rebuilding and regenerating his body. Now, I don't agree with all the foods that he ate, but the point is healing the metabolism. That's the point. So does that make sense here? Yeah. So, and he was treating a lot of people in Austria in similar situations. So there it is, within 4 years, Wolfgang. And he says the increase in body mass is an interesting phenomenon which seems to happen automatically on a low-carb diet, even without any increase in physical activity on the part of the person concerned. Here was a doctor, nearly 50 years of age, with far fewer possibilities to do any physical training, and yet with a stature more impressive than I possessed as a medical student 30 years before. And there's a picture on his 90th birthday. I mean, he's not stuck in a nursing home, is he? So the principle here, reduce sugar in the diet. So you can do vegan, do whatever you like, and I think the principle I'm wanting to communicate is the damage sugar does, the damage that crazy extreme diets do, where there's an imbalance. God wants a balance in all things. So, yeah. Common denominators of success. Now I'm going to look, I showed you some pictures of, I'm going to end on this, people that had high carbohydrate nutrition and regenerated their health, and then I've showed you pictures and stories and experience of people that did low carb nutrition. Fair enough, so sort of balance that out. Now, what I was interested in was the common denominator, okay, for both groups. You interested in that, the common denominators? All right, this gets exciting. So, and I just want to say about the men in Minnesota experiment simply needed to increase their caloric intake. They had an insatiable appetite and eating up to 6,000, 12,000 calories a day. So however, they did not have metabolic problems. So I don't want you to confuse the two or three groups. And they got well. And anyway, so through point one, what are the common denominators? Healing takes time, recovery is rarely linear, and there are ups and downs along the way. And it sometimes took between 1 and 2 years for the body of the people to feature to fully rebuild. Remember Mrs. X, the carrot juice lady, and that little 5-year-old kid, 2 years, and Wolfgang 4 years. So Jordan Rubin took him a while, and this George Malcolmus took him 1 year to heal colon cancer with the carrot juice and the raw food. So the thing is, the common denominator, they didn't have refined sugar, table sugar. or excess starch, bread and pasta and all that. They reduce that stuff. And cell-damaging trans fats like margarines and these man-made oils, or highly processed food. So that's simple basics. Now, do you want to see the clinical evidence of Wolfgang's studies with his patients, with graphs? Do you want to see who wants to see the clinical evidence? All right. Blood sugar. Those that have a nursing background or understand this kind of thing, the spikes, they achieved within 2.5 hours, anyway, they developed a normal spike. Diabetes. Average blood fasting sugar in patients with slight diabetes that improved at balance. See the progression of improvement? That's after months, 6 months. So the blood sugar came down. Systolic blood pressure. Blood hemoglobin, which high blood hemoglobin apparently is associated with increase in heart disease, decrease. That's with 130 of his patients. It's interesting. Cholesterol, balanced out. The younger, the better. Not going to read all the details, but it's all there. That's with 263 people. That's Wolfgang's own blood chemistry there. See, by the way, he didn't believe in this whole myth about fats and everything, that we dismantled that myth yesterday. You know, the sugar industry, the whole thing there. So it's all normal. And Crohn's disease are getting very good recovery in that time of 1.5 years, 1 year. Ulcerative colitis, that was really hard to help, but it took up to 8 years. Blood iron levels, blood iron went up, and blood calcium after 1 month. So, summary, Bible, Ellen White and other health experts tell us plant-based diet is the diet of choice. However, circumstances, including our physical constitution, our personal health, will dictate whether a high carbohydrate plant-based diet is best for you personally. Metabolic diseases of affluence prevent some people from successfully adopting a high-carb diet, at least until their hormones and metabolism balances and their broken bodies heal. The Bible, E.G. White, and many health experts refer to the honey principle, the importance of minimising sugar. The excessive consumption of refined table sugar can be ruinous to health. The Bible, Ellen White, many health experts differentiate between good fats and bad fats. Bad fats are not necessarily saturated fats. For example, it has been shown by various studies and evident by patient recovery stories that olives and olive oil have many health benefits, and they include saturated fats. Furthermore, milk, cream, eggs can help restore health and detox poisons from the bodies. So that's it, and I've just at the end on these stick, I've got a bit more about anabolic process, how that happens, a bit on gut health, and yeah, so that was hard. Yeah, be blessed by that, any of that information? Yeah. Yeah, so go and do your research, and thank you for the opportunity to hear me share about my experiments and some of my research. It's been a real blessing, and I thank Father too for some of the things that he's given me insights, or able to just find some of these things. So I pray that it'll be a blessing. I really know this is going to be helpful for at least someone out there. And the reason I went into this specific detail, because I wish I knew these kinds of things before, years ago. It would have saved me a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and a lot of money, and a lot of running around. So, praise Father. How about we just pray, close in prayer. Father, I just thank you for your saving, healing power. And I thank you that you have different ways to recover your children. And sometimes when it seems hopeless, there's something out there. And most of all, that your healing love, that's what's more important than anything. But the body has to be whole before we can really appreciate life to the full and experience the spiritual in a quality way. When you're sick, when you're in pain, when you're suffering, when there's inflammation, it's a distraction. And it's the people in the world community, in the real world, that they understand. They're starting to take health as a priority and starting to exercise and clean up their diet and do these things and fast. And Lord's little rebuke sometimes to the wider Adventist community that we can be smug and not move on and progress. And so, Father, I feel the need for all of us to repent, myself. I'm just sorry, Father, I've failed in the past and just there's consequences. So pray that we can take and build on this knowledge and just be careful of customs in society that are ruinous to the health. And not to be fanatical, not to say, no, we're never going to have sugar again or anything like that. Want us to avoid extremes, let's not be extreme. But to at least minimise some of these things and not offend people, not to be, scrutinising what other people are doing, whatever, but find out what's best for us, Father, and we thank you for that. So I pray for special health and blessing and healing with your agape love. In Jesus' name, amen.